All righty. Okay, I know we've got a few more people entering the chat, so I think Josie and CJ are still the co-hosts. If you guys can watch that for me. If you haven't yet been contacted about being a team lead, but you're on here, we are so glad that you're here. Please make sure you email me any offices that you would like to be a team lead for or that you could help assist with, whether you are got a strong presence in the district or you have a personal relationship with a member of Congress, because again, that goes such a long way for them to see a familiar face, somebody they know from the district, or somebody they know has 6 branches in Main Street, whatever that looks like. So please send me your names in any offices, and we'll make sure that we have you guys listed. We encourage the more the merrier. We want to be sure that we're encouraging multiple credit unions in meetings to speak. So you'll see we have multiple team leads for each office. We kind of developed the term core four. We don't always have four. Sometimes we have less, sometimes we have more. But either way, we are glad that you're here and we're glad that you guys are helping lead because, again, it's much more impactful and effective for members of Congress to hear directly from their constituents, you guys. So you all, as our trustee leaders, again, thank you for being willing to help tee up conversations, walk through issues, because it also encourages other credit unions to speak up when they hear from one of their own peers. So we hope that by the end of the day, whenever we have been through a lot of meetings, that everybody in your group, because a lot of times people will group together regionally because of course you have similar footprints as those in your neighboring counties, that by the end of the day, if you have a first timer or somebody else, sorry, I just got a text asking for the Zoom link, that you can call on somebody who may mention it to you in the hallway, hey, I've got a good story on small business lending, or a story about the way that they're using CDFI funding to reach a underserved or marginalized group. If you hear from somebody, call on them, make sure you give them that opportunity to speak up instead of, allowing the same few people to control the conversation. Again, you saw so many people's first times at GAC, which is so exciting. And so you want to give them the full experience. But we know that a lot of times that takes learning from veterans like yourselves. So as we mentioned, and let me find the document to share. So we are going to have the one-pagers for you guys in DC. Every single person will have one, and they will be in the folders that you will receive. But we are also going to have a few extra for those of you who may be leading multiple meetings, because some of you, of course, have such large footprints, which is great because we can throw you into multiple offices. So just know that we'll have these for you in DC. We're waiting on 2 last bills, which we expect to be introduced at the end of this week. So you will see we've got blanks here and here. I just wanted to flag these for you. We're really hopeful. Of course, we are at the will of Congress, so we will see if they introduce them before the end of the week. If not, we'll be sharing these bill numbers in our briefing next week, and encouraging credit unions to write these down so they can reflect on them whenever we are in the Hill meetings. And so one of the most important things for you guys to be aware of as we get ready for these Hill meetings is that you all, as our team leads, we always plan to have one league staffer in every single meeting. However, sometimes, we may have 6 meetings at the same time. And so we'll never throw you into a meeting if we're not comfortable that you can't lead it yourself, or that it's a member of Congress who is super supportive of credit union issues. But what is so helpful to us, even if we do have league staff in the meeting, because everyone can interpret things differently, if you pick up on an office who may be especially supportive of an issue, who may be flaky on an issue, or who is of concern, please write them down, shoot me a text, shoot me an email, the office, the staff that's in the meeting, if you can get the staff's name, and what the issue is. If we can follow up to secure a co-sponsor on one of our reg relief bills, we want to do that, because the 4 bills that we've got that we're supporting, and potentially more that may fall into this package, the more co-sponsors we have, even from members off committee, will go a long way in ensuring that those credit union-backed priorities get included in the full package. So again, please take notes of offices of interest, whether that's good or bad, because a lot of times we have offices who may need additional education. We may have a brand new staffer who had no idea the difference between credit unions and banks. And you guys know this because you guys have been on the Hill before. There is constant turnover on the Hill. So we have a lot of new staff at any given time. And if you identify any that could use some extra education on any of our issues, I hope you will let us know. So let me make sure I check my notes before I dive right into the issues. One of the other things to make you guys aware of, you all know that it is easy to get sidetracked, and sometimes you may have participants in the meeting who may get sidetracked and veer away from credit union issues. You all, as the credit union team leads, when you identify the appropriate opportunity to interject, of course, our team will be in there. If we don't get to them first, you have the authority and the wherewithal to interject and bring it back to our priorities. Again, our team will be in there, so if you give us the eyes, we will jump in if we aren't already. But we know that happens. And again, there's so many divisive issues being discussed in DC right now that it will inevitably happen again next week at some point. So I did want to mention that. Again, you can either give us the eyes, we'll probably jump in immediately, but know that you also have that ability yourselves and that authority. So you all, as our, experienced pros, are really going to be the ones who are kind of checking the temperature on issues. So, of course, our first ask and what we're first going to be discussing is the impact of credit unions in an effort to tie that back to our credit union tax structure and why we need to preserve the unique structure of credit unions. You may have offices, and this is perfect. This is perfect. So please don't be alarmed if this happens. You may have offices that are like, Kevin, I'm with you 100%. I've already talked to the chairman, like Gus Bilirakis. I've already talked to the chairman. This is a non-issue. Congressman, thank you. And we'll move on. But you may have offices who need to hear more, who need more education, again, who may not know the difference between credit unions and banks. So kind of gut check it, when we have exhausted the issue, when we feel like we've won the member over, then we can pivot. But you guys will know, you'll get that feeling. You may have a member comments who's like, listen, Jackie, I'm good. I love my credit unions, which we love that. And again, if we have those members who are like, I'm willing to go speak to leadership on your behalf, please make note of them so we can be sure that we've got a whip list ready to go in the case it's needed. But we've done a lot of prep work leading up to this week that puts us in a really good position. But again, we cannot take anything for granted when it comes to our tax status. So I wanted to share that. And then we will dive into right-sizing regulation and supporting relief measures. Again, there's a big appetite for what regulatory relief should come and how this should look. Right now, you've got the Financial Services Committee. This is originating in the House, but it is something that is being discussed in the Senate. One of the things I mentioned on this is you may have some of the offices that we're speaking with who are like, why are you talking to me about this? I'm not on financial services, or I'm not on banking. But again, the goal is if we get enough members of Congress, even if they are off committee, to co-sponsor these pieces of legislation, that financial services and banking leadership cannot say no. We want to have enough support and make enough noise around these priorities that when leadership is identifying what should go into that package, that they're immediately like, oh, my credit union said we've got to adjust the CTR filing threshold, or we've got to include the Board Modernization Act. Again, the Board Modernization Act has passed the House 3 times, so no need to belabor this in the House other than with a thank you. You can see on the app, before you go in, I mentioned the member profiles, you can see if they've co-sponsored legislation for us. So with this, I would either quickly say, Congressman, thank you for your support of the Board Modernization Act. Thank you for co-sponsoring it. We were so glad to see it passed. We're hopeful that the Senate will take this up and include this as part of the package. But the Senate's been the holdup, which is why this is still a priority listed on this page when we are discussing with our senators. It's very non-controversial. It's passed unanimously all 3 times and with overwhelming bipartisan support. So it's something that is a common sense piece of legislation. The CFPB is, again, the one kind of nuanced issue where, for the most part, we know, and you may have some offices. We hosted a member of Congress last week, a Democrat from Montgomery, who brought up the need for CFPB reform. So you may have some Dems who bring it up to you, which is okay. And that's why I think bringing the CFPB under the traditional appropriations process is really a nonpartisan talking point, because like we mentioned on the last call, there's got to be some sort of oversight and accountability, regardless of who is in control of the White House or the CFPB. And again, there is a sentiment that there needs to be a CFPB, but what they should be focused on is kind of the question that's being debated on right now. And again, we have predatory practices happening, all around us, like payday lenders, and yet we don't always see them being pursued the same way that regulated financial institutions are. So we can cater that argument to the office, but this is a very red meat bill for Republicans. So it's had tremendous support in the past, and likely will again, especially as DOJ is taking a hard look at the CFPB. And the reason CFPB is last is because DOJ is ripping apart the CFPB, or doing their best to do so. So I would not waste too much time talking about the CFPB because it is in process. Reform is in process. But again, we have a lot of members who are interested in this, like Rick Scott, for example, has introduced legislation in the past on this. So did want to share that.
Hey,
And
Grace, could I ask a question about the board meeting requirement bill?
yes.
I'm curious, are there similar efforts going on in the states that the league represents, or do you want to change on the federal level first and then give parity to the states?
So we have some states that actually already allow for minimal board meetings. I believe Georgia allows for 6. If there's any Georgians who would like to speak up on that, please correct me. But we are always pushing charter modernization in all of our states.
Thank you.
In Georgia, it's 10.
So not 12. So there is state precedent for not meeting monthly. And there's a number of states, but it's a very non-controversial thing. But absolutely, state and federal modernizations, we're constantly pushing. So, thank you, Steve. And then the last thing I just close with is you guys are our team leads. At the end of the day, our goal is to drive home the asks. You can see these bolded on both of these buckets. So this is how you bring it home. We hope that you will co-sponsor these pieces of legislation. In the Senate, we need a CTR bill filed. And so can we count on you to be our champion? I mean, I know we have several members who have personal stories. If we identify those, I know can think of like 3 members from our delegation who can talk about how they've been personally victimized by the IRS. And so they may be all in. And if that's the case, please let me know so we can follow up and we can get companion legislation introduced in the Senate. Okay. Any questions?
Hey, Grace, this is Atticus from True Lion. This has been very helpful. Thank you so much. Quick question on the CFPB supervision threshold. Is it 50? Wasn't the original bill at 50 billion, and now has it been changed to 15, or am I just confused?
So the threshold is 10 billion.
It's 10 billion now, right?
Mm-hmm. The NCUA, of course, adjusted their threshold for ones from 10 to 15. So there is precedent for making that adjustment. And then 15 is also consistent with our inflation argument on CTRs and the small business exemption. Okay. So just to be in line and consistent, of course, we would love to see it closer to 50, 100 billion. I know, Kevin, I'm sorry, I can't give you the world, not yet, but we're working on it. As soon as we get the NCUA to make another adjustment, which under Hauptman, I'm not going to say no. But we wanted to be realistic going into this. And again, there is such a sentiment for the need for the CFPB that the Republicans in leadership, they're not going to be able to like completely gut the CFPB like they would like to, given how slim the majority or the margin is for the majority in both the House and the Senate.
And Atticus, there is precedent for the 50 billion. You may have heard that because there's another entity that oversees huge financial institutions. That's called FSOC, the Financial Stability Oversight Council, and they've set their threshold at 50 billion.
Okay.
So that's where that comes from. And
I thought I was getting 50 from somewhere, and I could have sworn that Congressman Barr introduced something around the same amount, maybe last Congress. But again, I may be confused. I've slept a lot since then. But if 15 is the number, then that's the number we'll communicate.
So there isn't a bill at this moment, but if we have people, and again, we would love to see it higher. So, I would not immediately suggest that it's 15. But this is an idea that we would be interested in supporting. So if we have people who are like, hey, the FSOC, there is the threshold for 50 billion, and they're like immediately like, that should be the threshold for the CFPB, please make note of that. Again, we don't have legislation right now, but if we have 50 billion, I know that would be favorable to all of you. So we would pursue that 100%. But we're just working through the slim majority and the partisan dynamic that unfortunately consumes DC. But thank you, Atticus and Steve, for both those questions. Anything else? Anything we've missed? I know many of you have done this many, many times. So if you have advice to share as well for how to navigate those tricky questions or issues that may get brought up, feel free to share. But if not, thank you all so much for being willing to help lead these conversations. They are very, very important. We have so many key members of our delegation who serve as chairmen, who serve as ranking members, who are in leadership positions, whether on policy committees or all of the sorts. So again, you guys being there is huge, especially as we have so many hot button issues on the agenda. Thank you all, and we will see you very soon.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Grace.
Grace.
Thanks,
everybody.
Grace.
Thanks, Grace.